Sure. My name is Elena. I'm an artist here. I live in Corpus Christi, Texas. Originally from Dallas, I went to undergrad in St. Louis at the Washington University in St. Louis. Graduate school was at the New York Academy of Art in New York. So I've lived in Dallas, St. Louis, New York, and now in Corpus Christi for about the past 11 years. I love it down here. Being down here has really elevated my practice. This right here is my dog Wexler. I rescued him about 4 years ago. And all of the paintings that I make are images taken when I'm walking Wexler early in the morning. I love the way my neighborhood looks. I love Corpus Christi. I love the way Corpus Christi looks. It has a certain nostalgia to it. So this is kind of my inspiration buddy, my little helper as I get my painting started.
When you're going out and you're on your walks, is it just things you capture in your mind that you want to come back with, or how do you capture that idea or concept that you're going to come back and paint?
Sure. When Wexler and I are walking in the mornings, I often see like images like I think are going to be really, really cool. And so luckily I have my phone with me. I snap up a couple pictures. I take some mental notes of what it actually, like the colors and like the value structure actually looks like. Because in my opinion, like the camera's great, but it really can't capture the way light works and the way like a feeling works. So the camera's there to just kind of capture the moment because I don't have time to like sketch it out. But the real magic happens when I bring it back to my studio. I combine what I remember with what I've captured and create a whole new piece that hopefully transcends the photograph and is more information than the photograph can possibly give. And it feels more like you're in the space, in the moment, than if you just had a photograph.
At what point did you understand or realize that you wanted to be an artist?
Sure thing. I've thought about a lot at the moment, like that I knew I wanted to become an artist. It's kind of weird, but I think my path to the arts started when I was like 3 or 4 years old. I remember I was in preschool and my little 3-year-old, 4-year-old friends looked at my drawing. She's like, "Hey, you're a good artist because you draw your hands with like a circle and 5 fingers, and everyone else just draws like a circle." And so, it's an impressionable age. I thought like, oh, I guess this is my thing now. I guess I'm good at art. And so sometimes I think if you just believe that you're something and you're like just kind of keep working at it, you can achieve it. So I always kind of thought or maybe knew that I was good at art. It's something I always pursued. I think going into college, I knew I wanted to study art. I knew I wanted to study realism, kind of like a realistic art. And I wanted like a traditional education in the arts. So that is what I pursued. First in Washington University in St. Louis, I had really great instructors there, kind of really learned like the basics of painting. And then I finished my education up at the New York Academy of Art in New York, which is a really interesting school. It's very much based on the classical model, where all of our classes were taught using the human figure as a reference. So drawing the figure, sculpting the figure, learning the anatomy of the figure. And so even though I don't paint the figure, I learned a lot there about how to compose a painting, how to structure value, how to structure warm, cool, colors, hues, saturation, and things like that in order to make a painting look realistic or feel realistic.
Along the way, have there been artists that have inspired you or instructors that have kind of changed the way that you had gone into the process of painting?
Sure thing. I've had a lot of instructors that have kind of changed or really, sorry.
It's good if you want to cut, take a breather, and be like, all right, let me regroup.
Yes, I'm just like, I've had a lot of instructors that have really shaped how I make my art. Like I said, my instructors, my painting teachers in St. Louis at the Washington University were really great. They kind of taught me the basics on how to actually build a canvas, how to set up your studio practice, which I think is really important. Like how do you make time for making art when you also have to have a full-time job to make money for life, also have to full-time job promoting your own art, and then a full-time job on that actually making the art. So I had a lot of teachers there that taught me kind of how to balance those 3 roles you have as an artist and how to enjoy life while doing that, because sometimes when you're balancing like 3 very time-consuming, like energy exhausting things, it's not fun. So they also taught me it's important to have fun and enjoy life even though you're trying to do all these different things. In New York, I had a lot of instructors too that were really influential to me. One of them being Peter Drake, who is an artist in New York I still keep in touch with. And he was the provost of the academy. He was really great, really chill. He managed to have a life as an artist, but also have a life outside of art. In my studies, there's been a lot of artists that I look up to, and their work doesn't all look like mine. I really like Ken Curry. He's a Scottish artist. He uses liquid to create like a very smoky effect. He uses it in figurative work. I use it a lot when creating my my scenes, like the one behind me. Like there's only, the way you get this is by, just painting really thin layers over and over again and having like really thin paint, so you don't even see the brush strokes. It just becomes like a gradient. Let me think of another artist that really inspired me. In making my art, I'm inspired a lot by the French realists. So Bastien Lepage, he has that great Joan of Arc painting in the Metropolitan Museum of Art that I love to see every time I'm there. And it's so trippy because it's like detailed, but it's not. Like the vegetation almost becomes like a pattern. And I really like that. In making my own work, I paint a lot of leaves, a lot of trees, a lot of grass. I'm not one who likes to go in there and paint every single detail. The things I paint, like I cannot identify, like, hey, that's this plant species. Some artists are really good at that. I'm very much not. So yeah, Bastien Lepage. Thank you. I reached that. Let me finish that sentence. Sebastian Lepage really I look at his work a lot when I think about creating like the texture of the foliage in the work. I also like Millet, who did like the Gleaners. I like the value structure and how he kind of sets that up. I really like Edgar Degas as far as value structure. A lot of my work is like Degas' work, where it has like a darker foreground and a lighter background, which is kind of the reverse of like what you usually see. You usually put light things in the foreground and have a dark background, so the subject's really highlighted. But I like my subject in shadow and kind of like a lighter background, so it kind of creates that depth, kind of creates that tension. So yeah, those are the artists I say I'm most inspired by.
Tell me about your process of you paint, you're on wood, correct?
Yes, I paint on panel.
Okay, so go through the process and the reason for choosing that.
Okay.
And go through kind of working through one of your paintings, choosing from what you paint on, size you're going to paint it as, and process in which you go through to get a piece.
Sure. So my process begins on the walks with my dog. I'm sorry.
Good.
So my process begins on these walks with my dog. I will see a scene, or I will have seen a scene many times, and I'm like, you know what, the lighting's just perfect. I snap a couple of photos, and then I bring them into my studio, and I transfer them to an iPad. I like working from an iPad because I can get really into like details. I can change the exposure. I paint a lot of dark scenes that have a lot of black in them, but I pump up the exposure and the saturation because, sometimes you have to use a black with like warm undertones. Sometimes you have to use them with like cooler undertones, or, it's not just all one color. There's not just like one tube of paint. There's many tubes of paint and many things you can add to it. So I like my iPad for that reason. So I bring the image into my studio. I put it on the iPad. There's no specific reason I choose larger and smaller. I think I just kind of look at like gut feeling. I've always been drawn to smaller works for a variety of reasons. One is, they say big work overwhelms you. You stand in front of a big piece of art and it overwhelms you and takes you over. A small piece of art you kind of fall into and it kind of sucks you in. And I kind of like that aspect. I like the idea of like the little world that you kind of get sucked into. And then for practical purposes, smaller work is just easier to work with. It's easier to ship. It's easier to hang. If you're an art collector like me, sometimes you run out of wall space and you're like, well, I can't really fit that 24 by 36 anywhere, but I can always put a 5 by 7 in somewhere. So I like smaller work. So I only work on panel. I don't like the tooth of a canvas. I like the surface to be as smooth as possible. So I'll get the panel. I will gesso it a few times. Sometimes I've used the traditional white gesso. I've also used a clear gesso so I can get like the color, warm color tones of the wood underneath the painting. I always do like a first really rough in sketch, kind of like some of the ones you see behind me or to my left. So the first rough in sketch is just kind of like it's drawing. It's basically drawing, here's the lights, here's the darks, here's the geometry, here's like perspective, some color notes, but those will be refined later. And then I'll just get back into it. I work very intuitively. I rely on my education a lot. You know, it's not like I sit there and plan, oh, hey, this is going to be this color, this is going to be that color. I just kind of work with things. I know my education has taught me like how to use value, how to use color, like color temperatures to kind of create a space. And so I really rely on that background to say, you know, oh, this isn't working right. Is it the value? Is it the color? Is it the temperature? Like, how do I make it feel like a space? So I paint, I lay it in, and then I just get into painting. There's always a point in my work where I hate the work, and I'm like, whoever thought that I could do this? Why did I think I could paint? And it's usually, it's usually kind of near the beginning when you're like, you know, when you first paint it and you just have like the one pass, it looks gorgeous. And there's a part of you that's just like, okay, I can just stop there. And then you go into a little bit, like you're like, that kind of works. But like, you just got to keep going, and you really got to, like, I have to know to trust myself and trust that like every other painting I've done has come out successful. So you just got to keep going. There's also a philosophy that some of my teachers taught me. Painting art's kind of like crawling up a hill blind, or crawling up a mountain blind. Like, you reach the top, but you don't know you're at the top until you start going to the other side, and then you have to pull back. So painting is kind of like that, where sometimes you're approaching greatness, and you do a little too much, and you got to kind of step back and like, okay, no, that's where it needs to be. So yeah, my work is very intuitive, but also relies on this incredible background and like classical education I have. So that, yeah, that's how it goes.
Cool. On the process, you go, you snap an image, you bring it back. How true to that original image do you try to stay? Or what are you trying to do? Say if do you try to stay realistic? If there's a piece of trash in the image, do you just keep it in? Are you trying to beautify what? Or does it change as the scene that you're trying to paint changes?
I use photographs in my work because it's the easiest way to kind of sketch the image and bring that image back with me when I'm back in my studio. But I do not want the work to look photographic or photorealistic. I want my paintings to kind of transcend that. If there's something in the piece that I don't like, I just get rid of it. If I don't like how the sky is looking, I change it up. If I don't like the perspective, I change that. You know, I leave some details out, I add some details in, I stretch it, I make it longer, I make it taller. So the photograph really is like a reference, but I don't stick true to it. Also because cameras are great and they're just photographers, but they can't always, unless you're like really, really good photographer, you can't always capture the mood of a scene until you actually paint it. And I think that's partially because of the photograph, you get it printed, it's all one pigment. But paint, especially oil paint, allows you to have like depth. It allows you to see pigment through pigment. And this optical mixing, I like a lot of translucent medium. I use cold wax medium a lot, which kind of, it sets one layer of pigment on top of another layer of pigment with like cold wax in there that's kind of clear. So it has this kind of like translucent effect that I think is really important in creating the work.
Have you shown in the art museum before?
I've never shown in the art museum before. I'm very honored to be able to show there. It's a place I've loved ever since I moved here 11 years ago. I mean, gosh, what an honor. I have shown a few times around the Coastal Bend, a few times in Rockport at a Windway Gallery. I'm going to be at Anita Liebel Gallery. I've been at the Art Center there. I've shown at K-Space Studios locally, which is pretty fun. K-Space Studios, K-Space Contemporary. Non-locally, I've shown in Dallas and Houston, New Jersey.
So what was it like and are you familiar with the other artists that are in the Target Texas show?
I know of I'm familiar with some of the work of the other artists in Target, Texas. I've known Janelle for many years. We're not close, but we're acquaintances. And I know she just had a show at K-Space, and she's been kind of crushing it this year with all the shows she's got going on. So I'm really impressed with her level of craft. I think that's a big thing they instilled to us in grad school. It was just kind of interesting. So grad school was interesting because, like I said, it was a very classical education where they taught you how to draw and paint well. I think a lot of grad schools focus more on like finding your voice. This one wasn't so much because, their idea was art is a craft. If you're going to become a cabinet maker, you can't just like find your voice. You have to know to make a cabinet really well. And why isn't art as good as cabinets? Like you really, in order to be able to do anything, you have to know the craft really well. And I think that's really interesting too. Someone asked me once, like, about art, because all kids make art. They all do. Everyone from the age of like 2 or 3 years old is making art, but people stop. And why is it that people stop? I was thinking, art is a language. It exists in a culture. It is a language. And if people don't know how to use that language, they get frustrated and give up. So I think a lot of adults are like, well, I want to draw this, but they don't have the tools to draw that. And so then they give up and they're like, well, art's not for me. But I think everyone has the capacity to at least know how to express themselves through drawing. Everyone can learn to draw. It might not be easy. Some people might be better drawers than others, but everyone can at least learn that. Just like, everyone can learn to write sentences. If you were writing babble as a kid and no one ever taught you how to put that into coherent language, you'd probably give up writing too because you're like, I don't know how to communicate with this. So I think learning art is a craft and a tool, just like any other craft and tool there is.
Tell me a little bit about getting the call and what your thoughts were about being shown in the art museum.
Sure. I was so happy when Deborah first called me to be in this show. I was honored. I was thrilled. I was gobsmacked. I mean, good God. I was a little scared though, because at that point I had been making a lot of work that was 5x7, these little postcard sized paintings, which I like because I really like small work. I'm drawn to small work. When I'm an art collector myself. When I collect work, I like small work. There's just something about it that I think is really nice. So Deborah calls me, I'm at work, I'm like silently freaking out. And then she's like, Elena, you have to paint bigger than 5x7. And I was like, oh God. And so I haven't done this since undergrad, really. And one of the reasons is just practicality. When you live in a New York apartment, when you move apartments every year, you get tired of lugging around big 8x4 canvases. When you're getting to shows, it costs money to ship things. It's easier to get a USPS flat rate box than it is to like get a crate. So I've been painting small. Like I said, there's something endearing about it, but also practical. So I was like, well, shit, Deborah, like I will do this for you. And it started out, so I think my first toe that I dipped is I did some 16x20s. I bought some 12x18 canvases or panels. Bought some 12x18 panels, and I was like, this is big for me. But then it wasn't big enough, so I actually put them together. So there's like a diptych in the show of work that's put together because I was working and I wanted to do something to be slightly big. The biggest piece in the show, I think, is like 30x60 inches, which is the biggest I've painted in a long time. I still like making small work. I think I'm more comfortable around 11x14, but there's something exciting about using a bigger brush, and you have to step back from the canvas more. You have to do this like push and pull of the canvas where you get up close to make details and step back to make sure that it looks right, which you don't necessarily, you do with small work, but it's just like a smaller range of motion. So it's been fun making bigger work. I get frustrated because it takes so much paint. I used to justify like, oh, I can buy the most expensive paint because I paint so like it lasts so long. Well, not so much with bigger work. It takes a lot more paint. But it is fun, and I'm kind of excited to show people. I've been living with this big work for about a year and a half now. Most people who know me only know me through my 5x7, so I think they're going to be a little shocked, and I don't know how they're going to receive it, but it's certainly going to, it's not what they're going to expect if they know my work at all, to see this big stuff. I picked up my studio habits, I think, mostly in grad school, and there's a few things that I still carry with me. One is that you should always lay out your palette the same, because when you're going and mixing work or you need to grab a color, you don't want to have to think about it. You don't want to think about like, okay, where did I put that red? Where did I put that blue? It needs to be kind of in the same spot each and every time. I use a glass palette because it's easy to clean. I put some some mid-tone value paper underneath it, so I'm working like off a gray instead of like a white. So yeah, I lay my palette out the same each and every time. I also use Liquin and Liquin Fine Detail. I like work to dry pretty quickly, the paint to dry pretty quickly, and those will allow it to dry overnight. One other big thing I learned in grad school, or that I was taught, is if you need to cut corners, just like cut corners. My painting teacher, he hated cleaning his palette, so he used a paper palette. He's like, why bother like spending 20 minutes in the studio doing something I hate? It's going to prevent me from coming to the studio every day. So the thing I do is I buy cheap brushes. I hate washing brushes. I'm not good at washing brushes. I cannot keep these brushes clean. I cannot keep them pristine. I have had $80 brushes, and they're really nice, but I'm not good at cleaning them. So I buy like watercolor brushes, the real cheap packs, and then I just run through them. When they get too dirty, they're just out. Like I do clean them and I keep them for maybe 4 or 5 sessions, and they're just out because I know if I had to rely on cleaning my brushes, I would just have horrible brushes all the time because I'm not good at cleaning my brushes. So I think that's the two big things in my studio practice is lay your palette out the same each and every time, and cut corners where if you just don't want to do something, just don't do it.
Run me through your workflow of a day.
Okay.
You do have a day job.
Yes.
You like to go out with the dog, explore,
Mm-hmm.
go to your 3.5 mile section. Do you come back and immediately paint? Do you put that on the back burner? Do you have some images that kind of rotate through that you're saying, hey, I'm going to finally get to this? And when's your optimal time that you like to sit and paint?
This is a good way to answer that. So I'm a morning person. When I walk my dog, it's like 5:30, 6 a.m. in the morning. So I'm a morning person. I like to wake up and do things. On the weekend, when I don't walk my dog first thing in the morning, maybe I'm going to walk him later, I'm going to do a Pilates class instead, I will get up and I will paint immediately because that's when I find most productive. I also take a lot of naps during the day because I feel like waking up from a nap is about waking up from like a night's sleep. So I wake up from a nap, I'm also immediately productive. So the best times for me to paint are early in the morning or after dinner, because I also like when it's dark and I can just come in my studio and hyper focus and knock stuff out. I listen to audiobooks pretty much exclusively when I work. I like fantasy and sci-fi, pretty much exclusively those. The best kind of audiobook is the one like I kind of get lost into and I kind of feel like I'm not a part of that world. And I think it's kind of fun because the best parts of fantasy and sci-fi books is the world building. And that's kind of what I'm doing with my painting as well. I'm kind of creating this world. And it's also fun for me because I will look at a painting and I'll be like, oh yes, I remember exactly what I was listening to when I was painting that. Or I remember exactly what I was listening to when I was painting that. And I like to think, I don't know if it's true, I like to think like listening to the work kind of influences how I paint. Like if it's going to be more mysterious, if it's going to be more happy and bubbly, like, that kind of is reflected in the painting themselves. But I find painting, it's kind of a blessing and a curse. I mean, I was actually talking to my friend about this. We have a coworker who's not an artist, and we're like, oh, he can just go home and like chill. Like, what is that like to just come home and like rest? Like, I haven't done that. Like, you either come home and you paint or you feel guilty for not painting. But so it's kind of a curse that way, but it's also a blessing because, it is there's something meditative about it, that like, you know, you come in here, you do a thing, you make something with your hands, and you feel real good about it. And you know how to keep this part in, and then you post on Instagram and get 50 likes, and then you feel really good about it.
It will dopamine hit.
I will say that I know it's sad to see paintings be sold and walk out of the door, but I'm also happy they find homes. I'm kind of like a foster mom that way. Like, I have these things because, you know, I'm really sad to see them go, and I'm like, oh man, I miss that. But if they stick around any longer, I'm like, oh man, I wish that thing was gone. Like, I need more room. Like, I got to do more stuff. So,
well, tell me about that process. You've had some shows here and there,
yeah.
but what's your process of fostering and finding a good home for these?
Sure.
And, you know, other people have gallery and they have managers, agents. Do you only do shows? Do you have an online presence? What's
Sure.
the process, and do you do commissions?
Okay. So at the time of this recording, I am not represented. I don't have a gallery. Actually, I should step back. Because I kind of am, but also I haven't given her work yet. Okay. How do I say that? I'm just going to leave that part out because, yeah. Because she wants like an exclusive thing, which is fine, but also like, that's going to be a thing. Okay. We'll leave that out. So I sell my work either in galleries or in like gallery spaces. I have sold work online. In fact, 2 of my favorite pieces I posted on Instagram, and someone I know contacts me immediately and says, can I put a deposit on that one? I want it. Which is really cool. It's a little shocking because it's a little sooner than I want to let them go. But I have had several shows. I've had a few solo shows and group shows like over the past few years, and usually I sell things out. I kind of sell everything. I think that's in part due to the fact that I'm making small work, so it's easy to collect, but also work about Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi, when you're here, it's a unique place. You know, I love it. You probably love it, but not everybody loves it. A lot of people grew up here and move away, don't really like find the charm in it, but I find it's incredibly charming. And I think anyone who lives here or has lived here and moved away can recognize, they'll see my work and be like, oh yeah, that's Corpus Christi. I don't necessarily know exactly where, but like, that's Corpus Christi. But I think it's kind of like a stand-in too for a lot of towns. I mean, my generation, we all grew up and moved to the cities, and then a lot of us are moving back to these small towns because we see something that looks necessarily like a suburb or like a urban area, and we're just like, oh, that kind of reminds me of a place I used to live. And I think Corpus Christi is full of those places that, even though I didn't grow up here, I see something, I'm like, oh yeah, that kind of reminds me of that place that I used to be. So I think my work has been successful in the shows that I've had that I've sold a lot of work at, or just selling it off of Instagram, because people recognize it as someplace they've lived and loved. I don't know if it's like the air quality. I don't know if it's like the clouds. We have very distinctive clouds on Corpus Christi. I don't know if it's the potholes in the street. Someone once asked me why I like painting potholes so much. And I was like, well, I just paint Corpus, and Corpus has a bunch of potholes. So I guess that's it. There was one time where I did have a small painting. It was 5x7. And the guy who bought it, he's like, I love that painting. I'm like, yes, this shitty lot with all this busted concrete at Ropes in Santa Fe. He's like, oh yeah, I own that lot. I've never done anything. Oh well, there's a painting of it. So since getting my art degree, I've tried to maintain an active studio practice wherever I am. A lot of times it's just like a corner of the room. I've taken a closet in an apartment and put like a table in it and had that be my studio space. Things really changed, and I feel like my practice got a lot better when I got my first studio at K-Space Studios. I was living downtown. It was 2 blocks away. I could go all the time. I loved it. It was like my own dedicated space. Art, especially painting, oil painting, is incredibly messy. Combine that with like, you know, a lot of like pet fur, and like it's best to have like a separate space for your art. So K-Space was great also because when I moved in there, I had my whole space, the whole like studio to myself, or my studio space to myself. And the rent there was so cheap, I told myself I'm going to stop trying to become a professional artist. I'm just going to paint what I want to paint. I'm just going to rediscover my love of painting And yeah, that was going to be my journey at K-Space. I had, after grad school, I had worked for years trying to get into shows, trying to paint things that I thought were relevant, and without much success, and my heart wasn't in it. So when I got my studio at K-Space, I said, this is it. I'm just going to paint what I want. I like landscapes. I'm going to paint these small landscapes, and that's going to be it. And I'm going to love art again. I don't care if I sell. I don't care about anything like that. But I ended up doing really well. K-Space Studios was a great opportunity. People would come through on studio night. I sold a lot of work just off my studio walls, and it was really great. About a year after living downtown, it was it May of 2020, so like the height of COVID, we found this house, and my husband and I are like, we're buying this house. We love it. It's mid-century. It's in a neighborhood that we really liked and grew to love. It had a pool and stuff. So we bought this house and we moved in here, and it is about a 10-minute drive to K-Space Studios. So I just wasn't going to the studio as much. So I moved my studio to this house. We're in a pool house right now, kind of the pool house. The fun fact about this is I know the woman before me who had the space, she was an artist. The woman before her who had the space was also an artist. I think they were potters though. So this was like kind of a ceramic studio. And there actually had been like magnetic boards on the walls where they probably like put up their designs and ideas and stuff like that. There's a plug over there that is very clearly for like a kiln. So it was a ceramic studio. Now it's a painting studio. I did take down the magnetic like boards so that I could put up my art. I have a lot of very interesting furniture in here. I do want to talk about this a little bit. So there have been artists in my life who I have loved their work and they've been influential. I actually have several pieces of furniture that I've either bought or inherited from other artists that hold a near and dear place to my heart because I feel like the spirit of them is like influencing me or I'm inspired by them. My kind of painting trolley, or what's that called? My painting cart is actually was given to me by Lisa Bear, who is out of Rockport. It was her aunt's Estelle Stairs, and it was given to me by Lisa Bear. Her aunt was Estelle Starr, and it was Estelle Starr's old painting cart. And it's rusted and orange, and I think it's super cool. She had Estelle Starr Gallery for many years. Estelle Starr helped found the kind of Rockport art community, and I'm pretty sure she haunted that gallery space. Pretty sure I saw her ghost a few times. Anyways, that's her old painting cart that I really like and appreciate. My little set of drawers there is actually from Betty Shamel, who's another artist out of Rockport. She kind of downsized and got rid of her place where she stored paints, so she gave it to me and I kind of took it on. And then the easel that I use is an easel that was owned by John Olvey, who is a painter in Corpus Christi who passed away a few years ago. And I bought that at a garage sale. I know all the proceeds went to the Olvey Family Foundation, and he was an incredible artist. So I'm very happy. I love that I get to paint on that because it makes me very happy. Okay, about this space, I don't know what else to say. I'm going to fix this space up. For a while it was fixed up as like a bedroom, and we just recently converted it into a space for art. So, I'm going to get rid of the wainscoting. I hate this. I did not put this wainscoting in there. We did paint it pink because, I don't know, pink's a nice color. It was painted like this bright blue and it was horrible. Yeah. That's all I got.